All right, good morning, everybody. Happy Wednesday. We are so excited to be here with you today to discuss all about programming literary elements with Evo and using STEAM projects to incorporate stories plot line to have STEAM integration. So we're very excited to be featuring two educators today, Sheila Slawiak and Christopher Plass, who will be speaking about how they've incorporated computer science, STEAM, and robotics in their classrooms in really meaningful ways.
Thank you. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sheila Slawiak. I've been teaching for 16 years. I've had a professional background in computer science, working for high-tech industries, but now I teach middle school and in September, high school computer science. But I've always integrated with either English, science, or social studies teachers for about the last 7 years, because I like for my students to make connections when they're using computer science. Go ahead, Chris.
Oh, I'm Chris Plass. I teach middle school and high school. I do both. Well, now I'm doing computer science, but I also do English language arts. I've been teaching 13 years. I can't remember. And I started integrating technology into English many, many years ago before really anyone in our area was really doing it. Just because I always loved computers. So I end up with both licenses.
All those years blur together at a certain point, right, Chris?
Oh, yeah. I'm just like, wait, how many years now? I don't know.
Great. And Sheila is a certified educator with Ozobot. She's done some really incredible work. She has lessons in our Ozobot lesson library. These slides will be shared with you if you've opted in for updates, and those other through our YouTube channel and through our webinar page. You'll be able to access these materials after the webinar is over. So if you'd like to access Sheila's lessons, you'll be able to click on this link and access them. But they are going to base their webinar off this lesson in our lesson library. So with that, Sheila, would you like me to stop share so that you can take over the screen sharing?
Actually, Chris is going to do the screen.
Oh, great. Okay, so I will stop my share and pass it over to Chris. Thank you both for joining us today. We are so thrilled to be hearing all about this lesson and your content.
It's an honor for us to have this opportunity. It's so thrilling.
Give me 1 second. I thought I had it open. All right.
While Chris is getting that open, I can mention that the Ozobot Classroom Lesson Library is completely free. If you don't have an account yet, you can go ahead and sign up. Again, it's completely free. There's a whole library of really incredible lessons that are K through college, essentially. We have a college professor that creates content for higher level things all the way down to pre-K. So you can find anything and everything in our lesson library. So feel free to visit that if you are feeling inspired to look for more. And I will pass it back over to Chris and Sheila.
All right.
Thank you. Well, this lesson is about a 2-week project for middle school. Sometimes it stretches into 3 weeks. It just depends on the confidence level of my students. Just to give you an idea of my teaching philosophy and Chris's, we're very student driven. So the students selected the Wizard of Oz, and throughout this project, they were making choices along the way and putting themselves into heterogeneous groups. Of course, I facilitated that, and I knew what types of skills they were based upon their multiple intelligence and their learning styles, which Chris will explain later in the slide. This entire webinar is more about the planning of the project and then seeing the results rather than how to use the Ozobot robot. So this lesson was developed last year to students in 8th grade that never saw a robot in their life, never did any type of computer science in the elementary school. And the kids this year looked at what they did, and we added elements of STEAM, mainly art, engineering, and math, which was really exciting. So there's 2 videos within this, within our slides. One will show you the original, and then later on in the slides, they'll show you the end result with the 3D buildings. I'm very proud to say that this lesson was accepted at the Nerd Summit at the University of Amherst, and my students were going to present their results, but COVID hit. And then when I told them that the Nerd Summit was canceled, they said, we'll have our own Nerd Summit. So I asked administration, and they said you could do it at the spring open house in April. But then again, COVID hit. So in the last video, it's my voice because I couldn't orchestrate my students' voices to do the video. So, but they did everything else within the slide. Next, Chris. Slide 7 through 13, we're going to look at school standards. I used a combination of Common Core and NGSS, as well as the computer science standards at a Massachusetts framework. I have also used international ISTE standards and Computer Science Teachers Association standards, as well as UDL and CASEL standards. So that's what these slides are about. So many of you are teaching 3rd grade. So, as you know, the literacy in 3rd grade is to identify, the different elements of fiction, such as the character, setting, and plot. The math, they're learning how to use rulers or yardsticks, to draw geometric shapes. In engineering, they're learning how to define a simple problem to solve. In this case, it was, what does the journey look like? How are we going to tell the story of Evo? Who is Evo? Dorothy? Is it the Wicked Witch? Is it the wizard? So different simple problems like that. In middle school, and in computer science, they're creating simple algorithms. I use code.org in my middle school at the express level to give them like a 10-minute activator, just to give them experience and teaching them about algorithms. In middle school, in ELA, they're describing a particular story plot, and they're seeing the story unfold, and they're really analyzing how does the character respond to everything. In math, they're learning how to solve real-world problems, or learning about how to calculate area in geometric shapes. In engineering, they're extending their knowledge from elementary, and they're dealing with variables and models. In this case, it was a 3D model, and the variables would have been, I had different sheets of paper, and each team had to solve the problem of how are they going to tell the story on different large sheets of paper. I think the smallest was 11 by 17, and it went up from there. And in computer science, they're actually writing an algorithm and testing it and doing the iterative process. In high school, they're learning narrative techniques, such as maybe multiple plot lines to develop the experience of the characters. In math, they're applying geometric shapes in a model. In engineering, I would suggest that this type of project would scaffold to a real engineering problem where they're like maybe solving societal problems or using the UN 17 Sustainable and Development themes. You could look those up. They're going to have solutions for them by the year 2030, so that's in our kids' lifetime. In math, they're using 3D measurement and area calculations. And in computer science, they're learning about conditional structures like if, then, and else. So they're using the Ozobot levels 4 or 5 at that point. For the ISTE standards, we chose 4 out of the 7 ISTE standards. And we used the empowered learner to make sure that the culture of our classroom, that our students felt empowered to use their voice, make choices, and to select the technology. In this particular situation, it was like color coding versus program coding. For knowledge constructor, they were actually curating some of the research materials, whether it would be, what does these buildings look like, or looking up different, like they were reading about the directors who directed the movie and who wrote the actual story, and to get a background of the story. In computational thinker, they are actually developing their algorithms. And as a creative communicator, that is twofold: the student discourse of how they're making decisions. So you, as a teacher, you really have to walk around, maybe spend 5, 6, 7 minutes as they're discussing things, give them rules that if they don't agree, what do they do? And also, in my case, produce a video. So that's the 3 ways that they were communicating. For the National Standards of Computer Science Teachers Association, I chose all of the algorithm and programming because Ozobot has, wonderful levels. So in my class, with the kids not having any programming background except 10 minutes on code.org, they were not intimidated at all. In fact, some of them were moving themselves up and they were saying, gee, we can do this. Let's look at level 4, and they just felt empowered. And to me, that was truly an amazing moment as a teacher. So if they need to scaffold, like you have some shy students or younger students, you can drop the programming levels. But I think what really worked was using code.org as a place where if they got stuck, they could go back to some of the problems that they in their account for code.org and see how those scenarios compared to the scenario that they're in. So I saw a lot of students doing that. Moving on to the CASEL standards, we chose, there's 5 competencies in CASEL, and we chose 2 of them. That students needed to set a goal and work towards it, as well as develop relationship skills and teamwork. The goals that they had to work through was staying on schedule. So, they wrote out different tasks and different parts of their project, different artifacts were due. And in relationship skills, they were working on not only valuing everybody in their team, but then also problem solving by going to other teams if their team disagreed about an issue. Then I had them write out the issue, write out their viewpoints, and then go and present it to another student team. The UDL guidelines were very, very important because our school demands 100% student engagement. So we wanted to make sure that our students could self-regulate and not waste any time. They could be organized by their executive functions and that they would understand all the time what they're doing. So Chris is going to take over, and what we did was we developed from CASEL the what, why, and how of this project.
All right. So basically we had the objective or the what, and we have students will, oh, the wrong thing, I can't read it. All right, so we have students will make 3D physical model that retells the story of The Wizard of Oz by analyzing the plot line using Evo as Dorothy for the main character. And students will communicate their results using a video at the end when everything is done. We have, why is this being done? Well, it appeals to the variety of students' interests. It promotes critical thinking. It promotes collaboration between them and provides students with a big picture of how many different aspects can be joined to formulate a final artifact. I mean, project management. So it really covers a lot for them. The how. Assumes the plotline analysis is completed, the whole class. Okay, students form a heterogeneous group. The students identify what aspects they want to work on and with whom. So they're able to work together. They can choose color code programming, Blockly programming in the building. So they each have to get their little job. Students place project activities on their calendar. We go back to the time management. Know what your team artifact is and when it is due. So a lot of them all working together to accomplish this and create their artifact. All right, why use this project in a computer science or an ELA class? Well, provides a choice of assignments. There's so many different things that they can do, what interests them. It supports multiple intelligences, the verbal linguistics, logical math, visual spatial, and musical intelligence. So they have a lot of options of what really interests them, and they can go up and do that part of the project. Can support an integrated model of computer science, school or grade level integration. It definitely supports all learning styles from kinesthetic to visual to auditory. It really incorporates everything. So it doesn't matter what they really are, they have a chance to really showcase that in this project. The supports of PBL and differentiated learning. Use jigsaw technique to include STEM aspects. The 2 methods to program Evo. And need a variety of rubrics from the buildings rubric, when they make the buildings, the plot line or the character analysis, the programming, the color coding, and Ozobot, and cooperative learning. Students can give peer advice. So there's a whole bunch of different things they can be graded on depending on what they're doing. The PBL or Jigsaw student team. Heterogeneous team. So it's broken down to 2 for each STEM building, 2 to program, color-coded method, 2 to program Ozobot method. The project that we did had 12 students involved. Time frame, usually 2 weeks. And the PBL is basically a daily schedule of what they've been doing.
And PBL stands for project-based learning.
Yes. I'm so used to saying PBL.
I know.
So before they get into it, this would just be the typical plot line that we're all used to, especially middle school, elementary. You have identify the exposition, the rising action, the climax, falling action, and the resolution. And once they have all indications, when they have plotted out, they have the plot line. Now it's time they're going to create the little Ozobot robot that's Dorothy, and will start moving any way they want and start identifying each of these little points that they have plotted, and it's going to do something once it gets to one of these little areas in the plot line, as we see. So if we go back real quick, so we have so the student had plotted out their plot line, they've plotted it out, and now they program what's going to happen with Dorothy, the robot, when they get to certain things that they have plotted. So we have all the things right here of what the students have done. So when they get to the certain points in the plot line, Sheila?
Oh, yes, sorry.
So, yeah, so we have, real quick, yeah. So we have all the plots right here, from Cyclone to we find out the wizard's fake. So that's all the plotline stuff.
So what I did to facilitate this project, because middle school kids, they still need structure. So Ozobot offers 6 categories of coding. They offer speed, direction, timer, cool moves, win exits, and counters. And this is all new to my students. So they looked at the reference sheet to say, where do we start? So I'm like, well, we're starting at the cyclone. So what can Evo do to act out the cyclone? And they thought, oh yeah, that's the tornado. And then I said, when Dorothy lands on the Wicked Witch of the Death, what happens? You know, is it a fast landing? You know, are they celebrating? And they're like, no, they thought it was an accident, so we'll slow down the robot. So what I did was I said to my students, you need to use 3 categories out of the 6. So what they used was, as you can tell, they love the idea of cool moves. Just the idea of cool. They just loved that category. The speeds, and they did the timer. And they thought the timer would be appropriate when Dorothy was meeting the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Cowardly Lion. Because, you know, they're constrained by their paper. The paper is about 2 feet by 3 feet, like a poster. But I said, you can't use, you know, very much space if you're going to tell the entire story. So, you know, you need to utilize the robot to bridge time rather than the distance that the robot is traveling. So they use pause for 3 seconds. They did pause again for when they discovered that the wizard is fake, kind of like, oh, they were taken back, they were, you know, upset. They spun around in joyfully when the wizard was able to grant the wishes for the Scarecrow, Tin Man, and Cowardly Lion. And they had a zigzag when Dorothy uses her ruby slippers to get home. And it was just a nice little ending. What I want to tell you as teachers is it's not important that they use the correct color code commands. In fact, the most important part is your student discourse at this point. Is, to me, as long as they can justify what command they're using, then I had them use it. But they really had to flush out their thinking, you know, from a critical skills viewpoint. So that's how this artifact was developed. We do have a video clip that you could see that this was the 2-dimension one. I don't know if we have time, but you could go on if you like.
Want me to play it? I don't know. I can play it.
Do we have time?
Okay.
Okay.
Melissa, I'm Morgan, and this is our project with Evo Ozobots following the storyline of The Wizard of Oz. Everyone knows that she is. We used color coding with the Ozobots markers to make the storyline more real with the tornado and the 3 stops to pick up her friends, the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Lion. God, I'm sorry, that's so dumb. Are you using so many persons? Oh, yeah. Hey, I'm sorry, I don't like you. I couldn't. I just have to like go really low. Not with the flow. Like, I just like, just until she liked it. We put the yellow brick road on our poster so that it'll make it more real that the bot is following the yellow brick road with the munchkins during the story. We printed pictures and cut them out and placed them along the path to help represent the story better. we did another tornado code so that when she clicks the heels, it represents her going back to her house in Kansas.
I do apologize for the overly zealous students. I even went to the library, and so it was quiet, but other students followed. It was just the first time that the entire school saw robots last year. In fact, we took this project and we got accepted to exhibit it at the State House. And my superintendent, principal, and director of technology were thrilled. But I wish there was a way that I could just get rid of all of the background voices. So I do apologize for that. Moving on to slide. Now this year we're adding the STEAM elements. So we're using 3D models, and we're using Ozobot with these kids. I had 2 students, so there was 4 students for the buildings, for the Dorothy's homes, the beginning of the home and the end of the home. And they had to collaborate of how could it be similar, or what is the difference between similar and same, and how would you distinguish happiness at the end of the story? So those were their problems to solve. The Witch's Castle was another 2 students, and the Emerald City was another 2 students. And when they looked at me, I showed them their materials, cardboard and cardstock paper. I had some stars, some glitter. And I said, why are you looking at me like that? And they said, well, where's our templates? Where's our patterns? And I said, oh, didn't you know that engineers develop their own? And their faces lit up. I don't know if they were surprised or shocked. And I said, from our other projects, the first thing you do is research. So start looking on, Google Images to find out some ideas. See what you can do with your math background. And you take them through, like what's the area of the rectangle? How large is the paper? How large do you want the buildings? Little problems like that, but it was a lot for them, but I thought they did a nice job. So they decorated red stars to match the ruby slippers for the house at the end, and they put stars on the Emerald City. And they made the Witch's Castle. I thought it looked pretty unique for a castle. This is what their program looked like. It was level 3 for EVO, and there was a lot of iteration. What I did to scaffold this part was I used a lot on the Ozobot, I'm a certified educator, and you get like a lot of great materials that the company makes for you. So I took some of their beginning, I looked at the tutorial for Ozobot, and then I created task cards, because I figured these students, if you just put one task on an index card, they're not going to be overwhelmed. So I had them draw straight lines at different lengths. I had them draw squares, but I had them look at their code.org, because what makes up a square and how would you program that? They had to know the 90-degree angle, and they had to know that there's a loop. They're the ones that added the music. Hey, can we add music? I'm like, it's your project. And they loved the lights and the music of EVO. So you could see that sprinkled throughout the story. I thought it was nice to show the different episodes of the story. And they were surprised. Here's the video that shows that their program worked. I was very, very proud of them. Did you want to play that? Do we have time?
I'll play it.
Okay. project is about the classic story called The Wizard of Oz as told by the main character, Dorothy. Therefore, the Ozobot is Dorothy. Our story begins with a cyclone taking Dorothy's house up in the sky, and she and Toto landed on the Wicked Witch of the East, killing the Wicked Witch. She lands in Munchkin Land, where she is hailed as a hero. To return to Kansas, the Munchkins and Glinda advise Dorothy to see the Wizard of Oz, who lives in the Emerald City. On Dorothy's way, she meets the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Cowardly Lion. They want to accompany Dorothy because they have questions for the wizard. They follow the yellow brick road to the Emerald City. They meet the wizard who tasks them to kill the Wicked Witch of the West. Dorothy and her friends journey back through the Fighting Trees forest. The witch captures Dorothy and Toto with the Cowardly Lion and brings them back to her castle. Dorothy becomes a slave, and one day the witch tries to steal Dorothy's shoes. Dorothy becomes angry and throws a bucket of water on the witch, killing her. The witch melts into nothing. Dorothy and her friends return to the Emerald City to meet the wizard and to tell the wizard that the Wicked Witch is dead. They find out that the wizard is fake, but he can grant the wishes of the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Cowardly Lion. Dorothy then travels to the castle of Glinda, the Good Witch, where Dorothy learns that her shoes will get her home. All she needs to do is knock her heels together 3 times. Dorothy does, and she returns home.
Yay.
So that's the end of our explaining our project.
All right, great. This is the perfect chance to move on to Q&A. So if you have any questions, please use that Q&A feature on Slack to enter them. I know I have so many questions that just seeing the excitement and how invested and enthusiastic your students were with this project. And I wanted to ask that, Sheila, I know you mentioned that there were students who, when they came, that they would write out their issues and viewpoints and share it with another group. Was this just for the academic piece, or was this for more of the social, emotional collaboration piece of resolving issues?
It's a little bit of both, because in middle school, when they do disagree, their emotions tend to fly, and they take it personally. So for me to kind of mitigate all of those emotions that they don't really have any control over, and I'm more of a positive teacher, I don't want to redirect them to calm themselves or to show any type of embarrassment. I just created a process that they would have to ask someone that's not involved with their project.
Could you talk a little bit more about that? Because I think as educators, it's so easy to deprioritize that when it's truly such a necessity, especially when we're talking about teaching 21st century skills and just collaboration. It's something that, because teachers have so much pressure on themselves to teach the standards and do all these other things, I feel that a lot of teachers deprioritize that aspect, or they're not sure how to approach that piece with a structured way that works for them. So could you tell a little bit about your process and what that looks like and how that works in your classroom?
Sure. When there was, one or two disagreements, especially on the types of moods, I would just say, okay, we're going to start thinking that, thinking to a middle school student is, what do you mean? And I said, like, your head has to tell you what's going on. So what I want you to do is write down all of your reasons for a certain move, and the other person's going to write down their reasons for a certain move. And how does it relate to Dorothy or to the plot line? And then I would tell the other team there's going to be a little presentation that this team cannot decide which move to make in their color coding, and they're going to need you to determine that based upon their reasons. So that's all it was. It's very simple.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you made it so structured for them so that all voices are heard from students. They feel heard, they feel like they're invested in the project, and are using those critical thinking skills. So they're accessing so many skills by problem solving in that way. For the resolution piece of it, does that third party decide for them? How do you manage expectations? Like, because I can see them arguing over, oh, I want to go to my friend because I know they'll side with me, or maybe things like that might come up in that middle school setting. So how do you ensure a fair process?
Yes, in our we're related arts, so in my classroom there was close to 30 kids, and I knew their advisor and what academic team they were on. So even though they're given the choice of what groups to join, they're not really given a choice because I'm structuring all of their little decisions that they think are huge. So I would choose the opposite team, members of the opposite team that they really don't know. We're doing the best we can. It's not a perfect world, and they had to live with that resolution. But over time, they learned to stick with the team, and let's, decide as a team, oh, she's going to get us somebody else, and we're not going to like that either. So it just helps to strengthen their reasoning behind a certain situation. To tell you the truth, I learned that because I was on a lot of product development teams of new product development. And there's so many decisions when a product is being developed that you have to collaborate, and the whole thing is taken from that experience. So I just structured it like industry.
Yeah, that's absolutely wonderful to give them that real life experience and being able to say, this is what professionals do in the field. It's so valuable.
I didn't know how else to do it, to tell you the truth.
That's wonderful, wonderful. Christina has a question. Do you feel this project helped their understanding of plot or coding equally, or one more than the other?
I think that this project helped them develop the relationship of that coding can help you communicate the science behind English. And that was really important to me, that they knew that every subject has a science to it, and that using robots is a way to communicate, their science in their ELA. So that's why. They're 8th graders, they're 14 years old. I know that when we went to the State House, the superintendent wanted to have a dry run. So he invited our principal, assistant principals, the department head of English, and the director of technology. And there was like a lot of different groups of kids, because we had to select who was going to go to the State House. And they were testing them on plotline as well as coding. And they felt that the learning is, kind of equal. I mean, they were really, really surprised by all of this. So I just figured that every subject has a science. And now coding, they call it creative coding in middle school, because it tells a story. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Great.
What did the instructions look like for the 3D project?
You mean like for the buildings? What did I use
believe
for
so, yes.
instruction? Okay.
How did you structure the students' I guess assignment so that they could be successful in creating those buildings?
Yeah, I went over that. I did like a little bit of design theory, that if they looked around the classroom, everything is a specific shape. So I wanted in this, what was motivating me is that sometimes kids don't know how to apply math. They're like, oh, I don't like math. It doesn't help me in life. And I'm like, math rules. How can you say that? So, you know, taking a fun project like this and showing them that they have geometric shapes and that it had to fit on the line. I used a lot of the, you know, area they had to calculate, and they had to just figure out what materials. And they figured out that if they did rectangles, that it would be standing, and that a roof is really a rectangle folded in half. They were so excited. So those were the basics of my directions, because I wasn't really going inside. If I was going inside, it would be more of an architectural interior design lesson, but this was just the outside of the buildings. So that's all I did, was just a little demo, like the cylinders. They just felt like when they looked at the Emerald City, a group of cylinders, and I said, well, how are you going to attach them? I made everything a problem for them, which, you know, these are dramatic kids, so they like the drama of having to figure this out.
Wonderful, thank you. You also mentioned student discourse, and having like the most important piece being students reflecting on their thinking and sharing their ideas and how they were able to problem solve. How were you able to structure this so that every student had that opportunity to reflect and to spend that time in that discourse? Because I know with 30 students in a classroom, it can be super challenging to get around to everybody. So how did you ensure that all students had that opportunity?
Yeah, it was, you know, multiple days that you do this, because not the whole class isn't moving at a certain speed. You know, there's faster kids, there's slower kids, there's meticulous kids, there's kids that are slow to start because they're processing everything. So in order to determine the codes, they had a rubric of cooperative learning, and it said participation, and everybody had to, they had their names and they had like little tick marks, you know, when they had to like draw like a little tick mark next to their name if they proposed an idea or if they said something. So if they didn't say anything and I was walking around, I figured, well, maybe they're shy or they just can't get the words out because the other dynamics of the kids are overpowering. So I just gave them the assignment of writing their ideas. And that worked. But I think looking back as a teacher reflection, that discourse was so important that they could justify things. And you have to understand that I also taught I had these kids for 2 quarters or 1 semester, so that's 18 weeks. And this particular unit is taught in the 2nd quarter. So during the 1st quarter, they're learning digital literacy and digital citizenship. And the theme that I'm using is design thinking, that everything on a page has a reason, you know, the typeface, the white space, the graphics that you use. So I just transferred all of that knowledge to this project.
Yeah, again, it's wonderful that every student had access to that and every student was able to share their thoughts and reflection and had that opportunity. And it's wonderful that you made it.
Yeah, when they wrote it, then I had them read it, or I had their friend, you know, like, because they're in little pairs, I had them read it. So I go, you need to understand that your voice is important. And I also linked it to our Constitution and to our country. I think that's very important. This is a same class that develops a school newspaper. So I wanted different situations where their voice needs to be heard, because apathy to me is a disease. So and they like to talk, so it's middle school.
Absolutely. There's so much to say about you empowering them to use their voice and practicing that skills in constructive ways. That's absolutely incredible.
Thank you.
We have another question. How did you support students through creating programs in Ozoblockly? What did that process look like?
Yeah, it was definitely a scaffold because they were afraid. And I'm like, how could you be afraid? You do code.org express. Well, that's different. That's just one instruction. So I'm listening to them. So I'm like, oh, okay, we could do this. So let's draw a line. Let's see, because you need to know the length. You need to know how far does Evo travel for, one space. So you need, and I think you guys give us 10 spaces, 10 or 15. I think it's 10. So I said, if one space, and I measured it with a ruler, is this, how many spaces, how many moves? If it's more than 10, what do you use to repeat? And, just taking them through, because I really think that they were like, I don't know, kind of like overwhelmed. And I had to get them out of that and back into confidence. So between me demonstrating that, then when they were, you could tell they're moving me out of the seat. So they wanted to take over. I go, okay, so these are a bunch of task cards that I made. Why don't you make a square? Why don't you make some circles of different sizes? What does rotate left do? What does rotate right do? And I said, now for the end project of this, I want you to create a dance using all of this knowledge. So that got them going. And then the next day when I had these large pieces of paper, it's like chart paper, then, to break it down for them of, where does the house go? You could the houses weren't built at the time, I said, but use a stapler, use the tape dispenser, and just measure. Again, I can't emphasize how much importance math is. And they started to understand. They're like, wow, math is really everything. I go, yes. So that's all I did. I had a relationship with these kids, like it's interactive. It's not like there was a wall between us where sometimes I felt like I was a student,
Absolutely. And I just wanted to point out very quickly that for those of you in the audience that might feel a little bit intimidated by Ozoblockly or not sure how to begin, I want to share with you, we have our Shape Tracer and Ozotown games. So if you go to our ozobot.com website and you click on Create, this will take you to our page where you can actually click on games right up here. And these are games that utilize Ozoblockly, our block-based coding language. So we have Ozotown, which is based on the line following capabilities of Evo, but we have Shape Tracer 1 and Shape Tracer 2. So for any educators or students that are new to block-based coding, I recommend starting with Shape Tracer 1. And this actually does a really good job of onboarding you to how block-based coding works. And to Ozoblockly, because we have a smaller amount of blocks to use, and it's the only ones that you need to use are included here. And the idea is to get the bot to move across the line with the color that's set. So this one is green. I'll just model very quickly. And I believe one big square is 5 steps. So it's going to be a total of 10 steps. And we actually have a full webinar that displays and explains how you can teach with every single one of these levels if you check out our webinar page. So if you're interested in teaching block-based coding, but you're nervous about how to get started, check out those webinars, check out Ozoblockly games on ozobot.com. It's a really great and easy way to get started, and students love it. So that's an option as well.
If I may add, just so you know what's going on in my classroom prior to like this type of a project, when we're starting to talk about algorithms, I'm bringing in, a loaf of bread and a large jar of Welch's grape jelly. And I'm asking them, how do you make a sandwich? And I would do everything that they said so they would start to understand what an algorithm is and what is a step. They say, oh, you open the jar. I'm like, well, that doesn't help me. That's an end product. And so, you know, when you scaffold and you show them something non-computerized, it makes it very easy for them to transfer those skills a little bit. So thank you.
Yes, absolutely. All right, I think we have time for one more question, and then we will wrap up. When the kids used Ozobot for the 3D story, did they code Evo to move, or did they just control it with the tablet? I believe they're responding to, or they're speaking to there's like almost like a race car joystick option on the app. I don't know if your students used the tablet or if they used a computer to code.
Oh, we had old PCs at our school.
Okay, great.
And
So
we used that transfer program. You know, like you put the Ozobot on the monitor. They love that process. Oh my word! Any reason to touch it and to put in their program, they just loved it. So, and I also found out that you need to be consistent with the robots with each group, because there's very slight differences, but it will frustrate a middle schooler. So I found that out by the frustration of my students. Yesterday at work, now it's not, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, well, to ensure that tomorrow, I'm going to label this, you know, as a number, and that's the number that you're getting. So maybe other teachers would have known that to number things, but I didn't. So I just wanted to raise that as a way to mitigate any type of frustration.
Wonderful.
I can't thank everybody for their kind words. I really, really appreciate all of the support that you're saying with this type of program, with this type of project that Chris and I was able to do. Thank you so much.
Yeah, wonderful. All right, so we'll go ahead and take the last couple minutes to wrap up with a few announcements. If this has inspired you to get in touch with other educators or you'd like more ideas, check out our Ozobot Academy group on Facebook to connect with other educators and brainstorm ideas. If you're feeling inspired and would like to check out the lesson library, Sheila's lessons are in there, or you can check out other lessons or submit your own if you've come up with your own ideas after seeing today's webinar today. If you're new to Ozobot and you're interested in learning more and would like a demo with one of our STEAM specialists, this is a website that you can go to and fill out a form, and one of our STEAM specialists will be in contact with you soon to work through a demo with you. So that's an option as well. If you'd like PD credit for today's webinar, please email support@ozobot.com. And again, our recordings will be up on our YouTube channel. You can opt in for updates on ozobot.com by scrolling to the bottom and putting in your email address, and that will send you all of our webinar recordings if you opt in. If you have questions for Sheila or Chris, their contact information is there as well. So my name is Melissa Tui. I think I realized I forgot to introduce myself at the beginning of this webinar, so I apologize. I'm the Ed Tech Adoption Specialist here at Ozobot. We were so thrilled to feature Sheila and Chris, and we really appreciate you taking the time. I imagine it's summer for you and you should be enjoying your break, but you chose to spend it with us here this morning and this afternoon for those of you on the East Coast. So thank you both, Sheila and Chris. This was so
such an honor.
insightful.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. We hope everyone stays we hope everyone stays safe and healthy, and we'll see you again soon for our next webinar. Have a good day, everyone.
Bye. Have a great day. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.